To all my hustlers, dreamers, love dealers, I'm that kind of girl. Work hard, play hard, for my own heart, might just rule the world. I'm on fire, can you feel the heat? You can try to, but you can't stop me.
This is Marcy Burrows and Carol O'Savin hosting the Midlife Mavens podcast, where we chat candidly about sex, love, relationships, and life for women in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond. We're both psychologists who specialize in relationships and sexuality, but this isn't therapy. Thanks for joining us to discuss the ups and downs of life in the middle. We hope our conversations inspire and empower you.
A quick disclaimer. We're both psychologists who specialize in relationships and sexuality, but this isn't therapy. This podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional services from a psychologist or other qualified mental health professional. The use of any products or services purchased by you as a result of this podcast does not create a healthcare provider-patient relationship between you and any of the experts affiliated with this podcast. Let's get into today's episode.
Today, we are going to look at a question that we got from a listener and see if we can have a conversation around that. So, we had a listener who sent in the question of, she was stating, I would love to hear more information about feeling sexy in midlife, whether that means how to reframe the way you think you look sexy or actual changes in libido. I love this question. And we would kind of approach this in terms of changes that we go through in midlife as we're aging. And we thought we'd look at a few areas with that. And we may end up breaking this into several different podcasts, but we're going to look at changes in appearance related to feeling sexy and changes in mood, and then also some changes in physical health.
You think we should start with appearance? I think that's the one that there's been some discussion about so far amongst listeners, and then go from there into the other topics.
I actually had an interesting story kind of related to appearance just yesterday that I thought I need to talk about this in the podcast. So I'll start with that. So, all right, go to a physical trainer, and she does nutrition work with me, and I work out with her. And so yesterday was one of my appointments with her, and I had my weigh in, and her app she uses has this new feature where it compares you to other people. I think you could look at it across the board, or she was comparing me to other women in their 50s. And she kept using that term. She kept saying, well, wow, look, this is great. You're in the top whatever percent of women in their 50s, and you're carrying X amount of fat less than women in their 50s. And I kept focusing on women in their 50s. Every time she said it, I had this adverse reaction of, but I don't want to look like a woman in my 50s. That's what kept coming up for me. And I was like, oh, wow, I need to take a look at that, because it was kind of surprising to me how averse that part of the statement would feel. I couldn't hear the positive because I kept hearing the comparison, because I think in my mind, I'm comparing myself to women in their 30s and 40s, not women in their 50s. So I thought that's a good thing to bring up. The changes in my body are kind of hard to accept and look at myself in the same way and compare myself to women. But it's not a fair expectation for my 55-year-old body to be comparing it to a 35-year-old body. So, yeah.
That's really fascinating. Is that about self-image too? It's almost like your enduring self-image is that you're still in your mid-30s or 40s. Your internal sense of yourself hasn't caught up to your chronological age?
That's a good question. I'm really not sure what the answer is to that. I don't know if it's my image of myself or my expectations of myself, or maybe both. Yeah, that I have this unrealistic or unfair expectation that I'm still going to look like I did in my 30s, or I'm going to look like other women who are in their 30s or 40s, even though I'm now in my 50s.
Brings up issues of who are we comparing ourselves to? Appearance based on what we look like. Are we comparing ourselves to other women our age? Or are we comparing ourselves to what we used to look like? Or are we comparing ourselves to women that are
and then how do
decades
we
younger than
feel
we
good
are?
about where we are and feel sexy regardless of how old we are? And yeah.
Which then brings up the issue for me of, does that somehow imply that we cut ourselves some slack? Are women in their 50s? I just had a internal realization that doesn't even apply to me anymore, because now I'm in my 60s. That's okay. I'll deal with that. So does that mean that we get to cut ourselves some slack because we're now in our, for me, I'm in my 60s or I'm in my 50s?
But I think related to that, though, like my body, if I work out, which I usually work out about 4 days with weights, and then I do other active stuff other days, but my body doesn't respond in the same way to the 4 days of workout a week that it did 10 years ago. Like I don't get the same results from the same workout. So I think part of it is maybe cutting myself some slack in what I expect and how I talk to myself about that. Because if I'm still doing behaviors that I feel good about and I'm getting the cardiovascular benefits of working out and the bone, especially now bone's more important for weight workouts or strength workouts, then being okay with the results I get with the same amount of effort versus pushing myself to put in more effort that maybe isn't healthy for me. Even back then, maybe wouldn't have been healthy for me just to get those same results that aren't as realistic as when I was 30.
Yeah. What is the answer to that? I don't know. But I think the issue here for the podcast is, who should we be comparing ourselves to when we're thinking about those things? Should we be comparing ourselves to, well, one, I guess we could ask the question, should we be comparing ourselves at all? And two, if we are, should we be comparing ourselves to, like you said, our previous, the benefits that would accrue from 4 days of strength training a week when you were in your 30s versus now? So do we compare ourselves to ourselves? I know that in the last, I suppose it's been 4 years of consistently working out for 5 days a week with both strength training and cardiovascular stuff, that my body has changed. I am way stronger. I can see muscles that I could not see on my body previously. So do we just compare it to what we used to look like and be grateful that we look different now? Or should we be comparing ourselves to some ideal out there that
I
clearly,
think that should we be comparing ourselves is a really important one, because well, we all do it. Like I think it's a natural human instinct to compare. It goes, way back to like that just kind of fitting in is an important part of society for survival, even like. But so I think that's kind of some really like, what's the word I'm looking for? Primary, like really primary drives that we have, that kind of wanting to fit in, wanting to, in comparison kind of as a way that we manage that. But then also, how do we feel good about ourselves even if we're comparing?
well, there's a difference. The word that kept popping into my head as you were sort of thinking through that, Marcy, was belonging. And as humans, there is what I think is a primary drive to belong, to connect to others. Now, I know that that's not a 100% absolute. Not everybody experiences that or allows themselves to experience that drive for connection. But I would say the vast majority of humans do experience that. And is there a way to experience connection, belongingness, to be a part of in the absence of comparison.
I guess the way that I conceptualize how the mind works in regards to critical voices and those kind of comparison voices, I think that women especially tend to do a lot of those comparing voices. And they don't really go away very easy. We can try to fight them and push them away, but they are really hard to get rid of. So if they're going to be there, how do we manage them? How do we manage them so that they don't impact us as much?
And is there a way to shift it instead of it being a critical comparison and the focus is on somehow you don't look as good as this other person, or you're not as smart as this other person, or as fast as this other person. So there's a criticalness to it. Is there a way to shift it, how we do fit in a positive way, how we do connect to others in a way?
Yeah, or both. I can see our theoretical differences, which is kind of funny here because I kind of take more of a approach that fighting that voice is going to just keep that voice more in my face and make it less likely that I'm here in the moment. So I work on accepting that voice is going to be there while also working on having that other voice that is more kind and compassionate and less critical.
And I think that's what I'm saying, right? How do we turn up the positive side and turn down the negative side of that voice?
Yeah, so it's not so prominent and so powerful in our lives. Yeah.
We wanted to just briefly interrupt the episode today to make sure that you all have our contact information. If any of the content that we've talked about in any of our episodes brings up issues that you would like to explore with a psychologist, we want to remind you that Marcy and I are both psychologists and would be happy to consider working with you if it seemed like it would be helpful. So a quick blurb about each of our practices.
So my practice focuses mainly on work with couples and individuals around issues related to relationships and intimacy. I'm an ASEC certified sex therapist and work with things like communication skills, life transitions within couples, issues related to intimacy, mismatched libidos, any type of sexual problems in the relationship. I work with issues related to trauma and how that impacts relationships. And I practice from a neurodivergent affirming lens.
And this is Carol. And I would describe my practice as one directed exclusively toward individuals who feel like they are struggling to change some long-standing patterns in their lives. So you might think of those as core issues that have been present in their lives for a long time that are no longer serving them in the way that they did previously. So I can help individuals figure out what those core issues are, figure out ways of dealing with them a little bit differently so that they don't encounter the same kind of obstacles in their lives. I also work with a lot of individuals who identify as LGBTQ and with women who are encountering difficulty in their relationships with their moms as they age, or older moms who are having difficult relationships with their adult daughters.
If you're interested in working with either one of us, we both offer 15-minute consultations to assess if it seems like would be a good fit for your therapeutic needs. You can go to my website, which is Marcy, M-A-R-C-I, Burroughs, B-U-R-R-O-U-G-H-S, PhD, CST.com, or Carol's website, which is drosabin.com, DROSABEN.com. We also have our websites in the YouTube channel notes for this episode. And now back to our episode.
So I'm trying to think, how did we get here? So the question is, what are the kinds of changes in our appearance that we can expect as we age, as we go through midlife, 40s, 50s, 60s, and how do we come to terms with those changes?
Yeah.
Is that a good way of thinking about it? And feel good about ourselves? in light of those changes, some of which we might have more control over than
and
others.
I think for me, the value is to live a healthy lifestyle. And so what are the things that I can do that move me towards a healthier lifestyle? And also a value of being more compassionate, even in the presence of realizing I'm doing this comparison, but not really fair. So how do I lean in more towards the self-compassion and the feeling really good about where my body is now and the changes that I've made from working out and the healthy choices I'm making and the foods I choose and all of that.
And I think self-compassion is really key. Compassion in general, but self-compassion, especially if we're talking about our own shifting views of our bodies, whether that's on a surface, right? Our hair has turned gray. We talked about that before. Or we hold weight in different places than we used to when we were young. We build muscles differently than we used to when we were young. In whatever capacity those changes are coming, having that ability to engage with those changes in a compassionate way that help move us from beating ourselves up, right? But also not giving ourselves a complete pass if there's something about ourselves that we don't like. And so finding that balance, we're back to balance, finding that balance in how do I accept where I am and use that as a way to move forward instead of beating myself up for where I am, which doesn't provide motivation to move forward.
No, it usually goes in the opposite direction, that you're more likely to kind of say, well, screw it all, and I'm going to eat a pint of ice cream and binge watch The Bachelor on Netflix or on Hulu. Yeah.
Right. Do all of those things that aren't going to help us move through the change.
Yeah, or feel good about ourselves or feel sexy, kind of going back to our listeners' question that, if I'm working out and feeling strong and doing things that are good for my body, I'm going to feel a whole lot more sexy than if I'm binge watching Hulu and eating ice cream. Yeah.
So maybe the key, and this is likely to be the key, I'm thinking, if I think forward to additional episodes that we might do about this topic of the kinds of changes that we experience in midlife, maybe the key is the piece about acceptance. How do we find acceptance or compassion for whatever those changes are?
Yeah. One of the things I like to encourage my clients to do is to, when they are struggling with their body image, is to stand in front of a mirror and look at their body and find something that they like about it. And once they start to have a negative thought, to kind of walk away for that day, but then to come back the next day and find something else that they like about their body, and really focusing on the things that they do like about their body, and trying to have more compassion for the things that they don't like about it, and realize that that's just part of aging or part of life. Yeah.
Right. Some women, if you ask them to do that exercise, would look at their gray hair or white hair in my case and not like it. But others, like me, look at our white, really the change that it's brought to my appearance. Just the other night I was showing my wife a picture of me before I let my hair go white. And she said, "Oh my God, you were such a baby." I know it was only like 13 years ago. So, I mean, maybe that's a long time, but it didn't seem to be that long. And the primary difference was the difference in my hair color. I think the primary difference was. So I think different women will appreciate different things about themselves, and something that one person might not like about themselves, having gray hair, somebody else might really like about themselves. And each person has to own that appreciation for what they bring to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, the one thing I noticed about your hair, because I've known you from before you let your hair go white.
Yeah, that's right. We've
But
known
I
each other a long time.
We have, and I don't remember noticing how bright your eyes are. Like, your eyes pop so much more with your hair being white, and I'm always thinking, "Carol's eyes are so pretty," and I don't remember that from before, that I think it really brings out your eye color.
It does provide a stark difference. I
Uh-huh.
noticed that in pictures as well. I wanted to say about that, and thank you for the comment about my eyes. That self-compassion exercise that you said, where you have women look in a mirror and focus on a part of their body that they really appreciate and value. I have had clients who really struggle to do that at all, to find any part of their body, especially when they're looking at it in the mirror. I've had many, and I know you have too, many clients who will not look at themselves in the mirror. Disappointment, anger, hurt related to their appearance. And so when that's the case, I'll focus on more of a compassionate hands approach to helping women start to appreciate themselves and be more compassionate for themselves. So putting their hands on their heart or on their head or their arm or wherever they feel comfortable doing that, but kind of a laying hands on and just accepting, just appreciating, right? Giving a positive message to our bodies, because so many of us grow up not being able to do that because of what our bodies look like or don't look like. So starting where it feels most accessible.
Yeah. And that might and I do a similar thing with clients too. And that might be a cool thing to do in a episode coming up, like just walk through that, to have a compassionate hands exercise where we walk them through the steps of that.
Ooh, that's a good idea. I like that. Maybe an episode on some of the strategies that people can use as they're moving through midlife, that they can begin to adopt compassionate. I'm thinking about compassionate hands, maybe even just a grounding exercise.
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea. We can do an episode on how to cope with all these changes that we're going through and how they impact our mood. Just do a coping skills episode. So maybe we'll do that for the third part of this series. Join us next episode as we talk about coping with changes related to sex. See you then.
This has been Marcy Burrows and Carol O'Sabin with the Midlife Mavens podcast. As psychologists, we are big advocates for therapy. If anything in today's conversation left you feeling like there's more that you would like to explore, we encourage you to pursue therapy. In today's episode notes, we've listed links for several directories you could use to find a therapist who's a good fit for you. Thanks for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you in a future episode. Be sure to visit our Midlife Mavens Facebook page to share your ideas about future conversations.